We're going to cover the last 4 slides in Chapter 11, Section 2. So we'll just pick up where we left off with our last video. These all deal with the topic of deforestation. Deforestation is clearing of forest and trees to replace with other land use. It's not necessarily and not usually to collect the timber. It is literally just getting rid of the forest. It could be something such as expanding housing. It could be to put in a commercial area with stores. It could be a business putting in a new factory. There are many different reasons why we would clear a forest. It could be for a parking lot, or it could be for a stadium. So there are different reasons. The negative effects are greatest in the tropical regions because of the loss of biodiversity. We talked in the when we talked about different methods of collecting timber, harvesting timber, the different variation of plants and animals that live, even in the different sections of the forest, such as the canopy and the understory and the floor. If you're completely wiping that out, as opposed to just removing some trees, then you are losing all of that biodiversity, both in the plant and animal worlds. In arid regions, the loss of soil production, because once that has been, well, a lot of times they actually burn the forest to get rid of it. That causes the soil to not be usable. Deforestation also adds carbon dioxide, and that's released when plant matter is burned or decomposed. So the carbon dioxide that is released, and then the other thing that it does, it's a two-bladed knife. Not only does it put extra carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it also removes a huge part of the filter for carbon dioxide, which was the leaves and plants and the trees themselves. So while getting rid of the forest, it's really really damaging to the atmosphere because of the carbon dioxide that is released, and then that is not able to be filtered and turned back into oxygen. In the United States, timber from the eastern forest are what built the cities of America's East Coast. So you're talking New York, Boston, and in the Midwestern cities like Chicago and the Ohio cities, they were constructed with timber cut from Wisconsin and Michigan. So there was actually, we don't think of cities as having been built out of a lot of wood. We usually think of like cement and iron. But when these cities were first founded, we didn't do a lot of building with those kinds of things. Most structures were still made out of wood. So the wood had to come from somewhere, and it actually cleared off a wide swath of an area, one, for people to use the land to build houses on, but also, two, to harvest the timber it would take to build not only homes, but businesses and some infrastructure. So a lot of trees were cut down for that. During the Industrial Revolution, timber companies just kept moving around the country to where the most mature trees were. They wanted the biggest trees to get the most lumber feet out of them. So by the early 1900s, there was very little old-growth forest that remained in the U.S. And remember that old-growth forest means forest that's never been logged. Today, there is very, very, very little of the old-growth trees left in the United States. Most of the forests around are the result of secondary succession. It would be actually very interesting for me to see around our area in Morgan County in southeastern Ohio. Maybe that's something we can look into, as we think of our forests as having been here forever. But it would be very interesting to see if this is indeed secondary growth. Here is a map, two maps. I know that's kind of hard to see with the glare, but the first one is 1620, so that's very, very, very early in our discovering of the United States. And you can see most of the eastern half of the United States is covered in forests, and then some up in the northwest, especially along the coast up the Northern California, Washington, Oregon. And they're around where we would find Yellowstone National Park, and then just very sporadic throughout the center of the country. And then we see 1920, so this was 100 years ago. So hopefully we'll be able to get online and see some more of the updated versions, more than 100 or less than 100 years ago. But you can see most of the eastern part of the United States was cleared out, except for some areas down around Florida and along the Gulf Coast, and some at the very, very top up around the Great Lakes, northern Michigan and Wisconsin, up in there, Minnesota. And then some of the area that was still left was over in the northwest, still around Yellowstone. And then if I flip back over here, you can get, even though there was quite a bit left up there, it was still much less than it had been 300 years before. In developing nations, the old growth tropical rainforest is still remain in several developing nations, but it's happening rapidly in areas like Brazil and Indonesia. I may have told you guys in class that I remember when I was in grade school, I remember this being a big deal. People chaining themselves to trees and protesting. And unfortunately, we don't see as much of that these days. But you can see in this top picture, it's just the forest being just burned and burned away to nothing. And at the bottom, we see a very pretty old growth. I know it's not coming through very well on the screen, but very calming, healthy forest with big old trees. So unfortunately, we're losing that still fairly rapidly.